So what was medieval marchpane? The simplest answer is that it was a paste made from almonds and sugar. You ground the almonds very fine, mixed them with sugar, and added a little rose water to bind it all together. The result was a thick, pliable dough. It was sweet, fragrant, and pale white. Think of modern marzipan. Marchpane was its direct ancestor, and in many ways it was the same thing, but its role in the world was completely different. Today, marzipan is a simple candy. You might find it covering a cake or shaped into a little pig for good luck. It's nice, but it isn't a big deal. Medieval marchpane was a very big deal. It was a luxury. It was a status symbol. It was art. To understand why, you have to think about the ingredients. First, almonds. Almonds don't grow everywhere in Europe. They thrive in warmer climates, like Spain and Italy. For someone in England or Germany in the 14th century, almonds were an expensive import. They weren't something you snacked on. They were a special ingredient for special occasions. Then there was the sugar. Today, sugar is in everything. It's cheap and everywhere. In the Middle Ages, it was the opposite. Sugar came from sugarcane, which grew far away in the Middle East and Mediterranean islands. It was imported by Venetian traders. They controlled the supply and they charged a fortune for it. Sugar was sold by the ounce, often in an apothecary, the same place you'd buy medicine. It was treated like a spice, as precious as saffron or cloves. Most people sweetened their food with honey if they could get it. Sugar was for the rich, the very rich. So when you combine almonds and sugar, you were mixing two incredibly expensive ingredients. The cost alone made marchpane a food for kings, queens, and powerful nobles. Serving it was a way of showing off. It said, "I am so wealthy I can afford to eat this." It was the medieval equivalent of serving champagne and caviar. The third main ingredient was rosewater. This was made by distilling rose petals. It added a beautiful floral perfume to the marchpane. Like sugar, rosewater also had roots in Persian and Arab cuisine. It gave the confection an exotic, sophisticated flavor that Europeans loved. Sometimes other things were added, like egg whites to make it smoother or gum tragacanth to make it firmer for sculpting. But the heart of it was always almonds and sugar. The name itself, marchpane, is a bit of a mystery. One theory is that it comes from the Latin marcipanes, which means bread of Mark. This suggests it might have originated in Venice, where St. Mark is the patron saint. Venice was the port where most sugar entered Europe, so that makes sense. Another theory links it to an Arabic word mothaban, which was the name for a king who sat still, like a figure on a coin. This might refer to the way marchpane was molded into shapes. No one is completely sure, but the name stuck for centuries. When people ate marchpane, they weren't just eating the sweet, they were tasting wealth. They were smelling the exotic scent of roses from a faraway land, and very often they were looking at a work of art. Because marchpane wasn't just slapped on a plate, it was shaped, molded, and sculpted into incredible creations. It was the edible clay of the medieval and Renaissance world, and its story is about more than just food. It's about trade, power, medicine, and art. It tells you a lot about what people valued hundreds of years ago. Marchpane didn't just appear in Europe out of nowhere. Its journey was a long one. It traveled with armies, traders, and new ideas. The story begins not in a European castle, but much further east, in Persia. The Persians were masters of sophisticated cooking, they had almond trees, and they were among the first to cultivate sugarcane on a large scale. They figured out how to refine it into crystals, so they had the two key ingredients. They made many different kinds of almond and sugar confections. These were often given as gifts or eaten at celebrations. They were also used in medicine. Doctors in the Arab world believed in a system of humors, where food could balance the body. A sweet, rich paste of almonds and sugar was considered to be nourishing and good for the brain. When the Arab conquest spread across the Middle East and North Africa, they took their cuisine with them. This included their love for almond sweets. The most important step for marchpane's journey to Europe was the arrival of the Moors in Spain in the 8th century. They established a powerful and sophisticated culture in a region they called Al-Andalus. They planted almond groves and sugarcane fields. They brought their recipes. Spanish confectioners, learning from their Arab neighbors, began making almond pastes. In cities like Toledo became famous for it. To this day, Toledo is known for its marzipan, a direct descendant of this tradition. Europe got its first real taste of these new luxuries in a couple of ways. One was through Spain. The other was through the Crusades. Starting in the 11th century, European knights and soldiers traveled to the Holy Land to fight. They went to a world that was, in many ways, more advanced than their own. They encountered new foods, new spices, and new customs. They tasted sugar for the first time. They ate delicate sweets made with almonds and pistachios and rose water. When they came home, they brought back a desire for these exotic flavors. The real gateway for these goods into Europe, however, was Italy. Specifically, the powerful trading city-states of Venice and Genoa. Their ships dominated the Mediterranean. They had trade agreements with the Arab world and the Byzantine Empire. They brought back silks, spices, and most importantly, sugar. Venice controlled the sugar trade for centuries. They made a fortune from it. And because they had the best access to sugar, Italian cooks were among the first in Europe to start experimenting with it. And Italians started making their own versions of marchpane. They called it marzipan. At first, it was treated as a health food. Remember, sugar was sold by apothecaries. It was prescribed by doctors to give energy, to help with colds, or to soothe a sore throat. An apothecary would grind up almonds and sugar with a mortar and pestle and sell the paste as a medicinal treat. It was a sweet way to take your medicine, but soon its potential as a luxury food became clear. The wealthy families of Florence and Venice began serving it at their feasts. It was a sign of their connection to the wider world, of their wealth, and of their refined taste. From Italy, the love for marchpane spread north. It traveled along trade routes into France, the Holy Roman Empire, and eventually England. Each culture put its own little spin on it, but the basic idea remained the same: a beautiful, expensive paste made from almonds and sugar. By the late Middle Ages, marchpane was firmly established as the ultimate high-status dessert. Cookbooks for noble households included recipes for it. Royal accounts show huge sums of money being spent on sugar and almonds for the king's table. What started as a Persian medicine had become a European symbol of power. It had traveled a long road, and its golden age was just about to begin. The golden age of marchpane was the Tudor period in England. This was the time of King Henry VIII and his daughter, Queen Elizabeth I. It was an age of spectacle and display. The rich and powerful loved to show off, and there was no better place to do that than at a feast. And at the heart of the Tudor feast was the marchpane. A grand Tudor meal wasn't just one course. It was a series of courses, each with many different dishes. After the main savory dishes of meat and fish were cleared away, it was time for the banquet. This wasn't the whole meal, as we use the word today. The banquet was a separate, special course dedicated entirely to sweets. It was often held in a different room, a smaller, more intimate space called a banqueting house. Here, guests would be served wine, candied fruits, jellies, and the star of the show, marchpane. But this wasn't just a lump of almond paste on a plate. This was marchpane as high art. The pliable, dough-like consistency of marchpane made it perfect for sculpting. It was the original sugar craft. The cooks and confectioners in great houses were skilled artists. They would create incredible edible sculptures, known as subtleties or subtleties. These were designed to amaze, delight, and sometimes even carry a political message. What kind of things did they make? Anything you can imagine. They would build entire castles out of marchpane, complete with towers, moats, and tiny flags. They would sculpt animals of all kinds: lions, dragons, swans, peacocks. They made realistic-looking fruits and vegetables, like a plate of marchpane apples or a bunch of marchpane carrots. They would mold figures of knights on horseback, saints, or characters from mythology. These sculptures were not just plain white. They were often painted with edible colors made from plant extracts. A green could come from spinach juice, a yellow from saffron, a red from sandalwood. And for the most important creations, they would be gilded. The confectioner would carefully apply real gold leaf to the surface of the marchpane. Imagine a Tudor banqueting table, lit by candlelight, with a centerpiece of a golden marchpane castle shimmering in the light. It must have been an incredible sight. These subtleties were not just for decoration. They were meant to be eaten, but they were also a form of entertainment and communication. A subtlety could tell a story. At a coronation feast, you might see a marchpane sculpture of a king being crowned by angels. At a wedding, you might see the coats of arms of the bride and groom's families joined together in sweet almond paste. They could also be used for jokes. A popular trick was to make a marchpane sculpture that looked exactly like a leg of mutton or a meat pie. A guest would cut into it, expecting something savory, only to find a sweet, fragrant confection. Shakespeare mentions marchpane in his plays. In Romeo and Juliet, a servant complains about the leftover marchpane being hoarded by the pantry boys. This shows it was a familiar part of any big celebration. The creation of these masterpieces required special tools. Confectioners used wooden molds carved with intricate designs. They had tools for cutting, shaping, and stamping the paste. It was a skilled craft that took years to master. The sheer amount of marchpane consumed at court was staggering. The royal records show orders for hundreds of pounds of sugar and almonds at a time, specifically for making these creations. It was an essential part of royal propaganda. When a king or queen served a magnificent marchpane subtlety, they weren't just serving dessert. They were making a statement about their power, their wealth, and their taste. They were showing their guests, including foreign ambassadors, that they were a ruler of great substance. The Marchpane castle on the table was a symbol of the real castles and the power they represented. It was a sweet, edible demonstration of might. For a few brief, glorious hours, the Marchpane sculpture was the center of the world for the people in that room. Then, at the end of the banquet, it would be broken apart and eaten, its magnificence consumed in a final act of indulgence. Marchpane was the centerpiece of the banquet, but its role in medieval and Renaissance life went beyond that. It was more than just a treat. It held a place in medicine, in gift-giving, and in the celebration of important life events. It was woven into the fabric of society in a way that's hard for us to imagine today. Let's go back to its origins as a medicine. This idea never really went away. Even when it became a luxury dessert, marchpane was still considered healthy. In a time before modern nutritional science, people had different ideas about food and the body. Almonds were thought to be good for the brain and to provide strength. Sugar was seen as a source of quick energy and a general restorative. Rosewater was believed to be calming and good for the heart. So a doctor might prescribe marchpane for someone who was weak or recovering from an illness. It was seen as a restorative food, a cordial that could cheer the spirits and strengthen the body. Because it was so expensive, it was also a very comforting prescription to receive. It was medicine that tasted good and made you feel special. Cookbooks from the period often included marchpane in the sections for food for the sick. It was easy to digest, full of energy, and delicious. This medical connection gave it a seriousness that other sweets lacked. It was an indulgence you could justify. Marchpane was also a powerful form of currency in the world of diplomacy and social relationships. It was the perfect gift. If a nobleman wanted to impress his king, he could send a gift of an elaborate marchpane sculpture. If a city wanted to win favor with a visiting prince, they would present him with a massive, beautifully decorated marchpane. It was a gesture of respect and honor, because everyone knew how much it cost and the skill it took to make. The gift spoke for itself. It was more personal than a bag of gold coins. It was a piece of edible art, created just for the recipient. These gifts could be incredibly personal. A suitor might send his beloved a marchpane shaped like a heart or with their initials intertwined. At New Year's, it was common for people of high rank to exchange gifts. The Queen of England would receive dozens of gifts of marchpane from her courtiers, each trying to outdo the other in creativity and expense. These weren't just friendly presents. They were part of a complex system of patronage and power. A good gift could win you favor at court. A disappointing one could be a social disaster. It also played a central role in marking the most important days of the year. At Christmas, marchpane was a key feature of the feast. And Twelfth Night, the great celebration at the end of the Christmas season, often involved a special cake. This cake, the ancestor of the modern fruitcake, was often decorated with or even made from marchpane. People would bake a bean and a pea into the cake, and whoever found them would be crowned the king of the bean and queen of the pea for the night's festivities. Weddings were another major occasion for marchpane. A grand wedding feast would almost certainly feature a spectacular marchpane creation, perhaps showing the couple's new shared coat of arms. It was a symbol of celebration, of union, and of the sweet life the new couple hoped to have together. And even the pure white color of the marchpane paste held meaning. In a time of heavy symbolism, whiteness was associated with purity and nobility. The base ingredient, the paste of fine white almonds and pure white sugar, was seen as something special and clean. This made it fitting for religious holidays and for celebrating pure things like a new marriage. So, when you saw marchpane on a table, it wasn't just food, it was a symbol. It could be a symbol of health and healing. It could be a symbol of friendship or political alliance. It could be a symbol of celebration and joy. It carried all these meanings in its sweet almond-scented paste. It was a food that was deeply connected to the hopes, fears, and ambitions of the people who ate it. Like all great ages, the golden age of marchpane eventually came to an end. It didn't disappear overnight. Instead, it slowly changed. It faded from its central position as the king of sweets and evolved into the quieter, more modest marzipan we know today. Several things caused this transformation. One of the biggest factors was the price of sugar. For centuries, sugar had been a rare luxury, but in the 17th and 18th centuries things began to change. European powers, including Britain, France, and Portugal, established vast sugarcane plantations in the Caribbean and Brazil. These plantations, worked by enslaved people in brutal conditions, produced huge quantities of sugar. This new, massive supply caused the price to drop dramatically. Sugar was no longer the exclusive property of kings and nobles. The middle class could now afford it, and soon, even the working class could buy it. When sugar became cheap, marchpane lost one of its key features, its exclusivity. It was no longer a powerful statement of wealth. When anyone could afford the ingredients, making a marchpane sculpture was not as impressive as it once was. Its status as a symbol of power began to decline. At the same time, tastes were changing. New kinds of sweets and desserts were being developed. Confectioners in France and Italy were experimenting with new techniques. The art of pastry making was becoming more sophisticated. Ices and ice creams, once an incredible novelty, became more common. Meringues and other delicate sugar confections appeared, and eventually chocolate arrived from the New World and took Europe by storm. Marchpane, which had once seemed so exotic, now had to compete with a whole range of new and exciting flavors and textures. Dining styles also changed. The medieval and Tudor feast, with its grand theatrical subtleties, started to seem old-fashioned. A new style of dining, more formal and orderly, became popular. The idea of a massive and edible-looking sculpture in the middle of the table fell out of fashion. People still loved sweets, but they preferred them in smaller, more elegant forms. So marchpane adapted, it shed its role as a sculptural medium and became more of a simple confection. The name itself shifted in the English-speaking world, from marchpane to marzipan, closer to the German and Italian words. It found new uses. Instead of being the centerpiece, it became a component of other desserts. In Britain, it became the classic covering for fruitcakes, especially wedding cakes and Christmas cakes. A layer of marzipan under the royal icing helped keep the cake moist and added a layer of almond flavor. It was also famously used in the Battenberg cake, with its distinctive pink and yellow checkered pattern held together by a thin layer of marzipan. In other parts of Europe, it kept a bit more of its old celebratory spirit, but on a smaller scale. In Germany and Scandinavia, little marzipan pigs became a traditional gift for New Year's, a symbol of good luck. In Italy and Spain, confectioners continued to make beautifully realistic marzipan fruits and vegetables, a direct echo of the old Tudor subtleties, but now sold in shops as small treats. The city of Lübeck in Germany became world famous for its high-quality marzipan. The legacy of marchpane is still with us. Every time you see a wedding cake with a layer of almond paste or eat a piece of stollen with a marzipan core at Christmas, you are tasting a piece of that history. Those little marzipan fruits in a candy shop window are a direct link back to the grand banqueting tables of Queen Elizabeth I. Marchpane's journey is a remarkable one. It began as a medicine in Persia. It traveled with traders and armies to become the ultimate status symbol in Renaissance Europe. Well, it was the medium for incredible works of art, a tool for diplomacy, and a centerpiece for the greatest celebrations. Then, as the world changed, it adapted. It became quieter, more democratic, and more familiar. It lost its royal crown, but it gained a place in the homes and traditions of ordinary people. It is a simple paste of almonds and sugar, but it tells a complex story of how tastes, trade, and society have changed over 1,000 years.